Let's move on to our next story from realnewsandhistory.com, one that I'm enjoying watching, and this is about Trump defunding the elite colleges. So, Mike King, have at it, my friend.
Yeah. Well, this is another one that is misunderstood. But again, when Trump does something or says something that triggers a negative response in you, okay, or makes you question why is he doing this, or upsets you, always pause and understand that there is always a method to his madness. He's clever like a fox. How many times has he done this? We go back to when initially he had me fooled in 2017 with that fake bombing of Syria, which we later learned he was just hitting an empty field. But it appeased all the neocons in his party and it shut everybody up. And then he continued to do business with Russia behind the scenes to bring peace to the Middle East. He did it with all the threats aimed at North Korea. Again, that was to create a smokescreen for what he was really doing, which was making peace with North Korea. Okay, so there's so many examples. I did a whole piece on this called The Two Faces of Donald Trump. And now this is another case where people are getting upset because he's threatening to defund all of these universities because they're not putting a damper on the anti-Israel protests. So these colleges are being condemned for anti-Semitism, and Trump's going to pull the money. He doesn't believe in free speech, and he's Israel's bitch. This is the misperception. No, it's another smokescreen. What is Trump doing here? Go to the next panel. I'll explain what this is really all about. And I write in my article that second only to elite fake news in terms of subversive propaganda power, elite fake academia constitutes a threat to our liberty, prosperity, and common morality. How many millions of bright young people from decent families have, over the course of the past 60 years, emerged from these dreadful institutions with their minds and souls eternally corrupted? And this is from the article, this quote: the Trump administration's abrupt withdrawal of $400 million in federal funding from Columbia University. I didn't even know they got that much money. One university from the federal government, right? And that's on top of their exorbitant tuitions and their endowments, their multi-billion-dollar endowments, and they're getting $400 million in tax dollars. Well, he's pulling it, and he's also targeting 9 other campuses, and I understand that there's another 60 that are in process. Okay. So the schools, a mix that includes both public universities and Ivy League institutions, have been placed on an official administration list of schools that the DOJ said have failed to protect Jewish students and faculty. There ain't no students or faculty have been attacked. So why is he doing this? Okay. We'll go to the next panel. And these are some of the big ones he's targeting. It's Columbia, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, our friends who used to put up that scary death chart during COVID days. Okay. University, Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, which has been always known as a radical communist college. And there's more in the works. They're all being targeted because they promote anti-Semitism. But what I'm saying is that's just a smokescreen. The reason he's going after them is because they're Marxist, globalist, corrupt, money-grubbing institutions, and he's taking them out. What better way to do so than to hit them with their own favorite weapon? Say, oh, you're promoting anti-Semitism, okay? This way, it's not perceived that he's going after them because they disagree with his politics, or he's defunding them because he's anti-education, against higher education. No, it's because of anti-Semitism. Who can oppose anti-Semitism? They've conditioned us all these years. So this is beautiful. And he can make this accusation against any university or college in the country and take their money. So it's got nothing to do with free speech. It's about defunding these wasteful, corrupt, and subversive. It's all three. They're squeezing families, putting them in debt. Okay, when they have these multi-billion-dollar endowments, that's criminal. And then apart from the money-making angle, is all the left-wing propaganda and indoctrination that feeds off of the United Nations. It's called UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Science, Cultural Organization. It was the Eisenhower administration that began the process of implementing their directives or their guidelines into the university curriculums. And then ultimately it flowed down to the high schools and the middle schools. And that's why today they learn climate change and LGBT instead of the 3 R's. Understand? That's what he's going after. And this is the perfect smokescreen. Okay.
And Mike, it's important to point out, it should be common sense, but it's important to point out the reason we have so much of the trouble in our regular school districts, right, with the administrators and the teachers, is because if you look at the age group now, they've all come through these woke institutions. Mm-hmm. So, in many cases, you're good, bad, or indifferent. You're dealing. It's not so much that the top agenda is evil. Of course it is. The top down, the UNESCO, their agenda that's pushing it down is evil. Yeah. But quite frankly, when you're dealing with a school board member or an administrator that is pushing for LGBTQ and this other stuff, unfortunately, they genuinely believe what they're saying because they just spent four, or actually probably likely 6, because they had to get a master's in these indoctrination camps. Yeah. So it's a system-wide problem that trickles down.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he started with Columbia because that's where the famous Teachers College is.
Right.
And that's where all the Frankfurt School, what's known as the Frankfurt School Marxist radicals who fled Germany in the 30s, they came and were given refuge at Columbia. And so essentially they set up shop at the Teachers College. And from there, it acted like the Typhoid Mary of Marxist indoctrination, because that you went there, you became a teacher, and you went, and then you taught at universities and high schools, and that's where the cancer spread. So it's very appropriate that he started with Columbia, but then all of these other elite schools, Northwestern, I think Stanford, it's going after all the elites right now. But there's a bunch more in the pipeline, and it's totally phony. A lot of the protesters themselves are Jewish. They point out these schools are protesting. They say nobody's been attacked. Maybe people say some nasty things, but it's wonderful because again, he's got people on our own side fooled, saying, "Look at that, he's totally pro-Israel," and this makes them, and this also helps him to maneuver on other fronts, such as Epstein Island, or rearranging things in the Middle East, because nobody can tag him with that kiss of death label, anti-Semitism. So this is why Trump pours it on so heavily with his professed love for Israel. It's a tactic, and he's using it here brilliantly. This is not about the Palestinian protests, all right? And it's not going to end here. I don't believe it's going to end here with the federal defunding. That's just the first wave. Remember what he said? He said this several times as a candidate, and even as president-elect, period. He keeps bringing up their endowments. Massive, multi-billion. These schools got enough money to give the next 20 years of tuition free for everyone. But they just hoard it, and they multiply their fortune. So it's twofold. It's a criminal, corrupt, money-making mafia machine, and then you've got the globalist Marxist subversion. So these are enemies of America, just like the media. He's going after them using anti-Semitism as his shield. It's genius.
It is. It really is.
So here's a step-by-step process here. What has happened in just the last 18 months or so. You had that fake October 7th, 10-7 equals 17. Okay. The Hamas on their paragliders going into Israel, right? And then you have all of these fake images coming out of Gaza. All of this serves to give Israel a black eye. And I believe the entire Israeli regime was taken care of a long time ago. And we have a wag the dog war over there. But now Israel's approval is down in the 40s. And then you have all of these Israel protests from the Q organized left. Q is organizing these protests.
Yep.
I am convinced. Okay. So it's like with one hand, I'm hammering down Israel's approval rating. And then with this hand, I'm praising Israel. So everything is concealed. And then I use that to take away the federal funding. And next, they're going to go after the endowments in due time. And then you're going to have, in due time, the University of America will go online. And that's going to be a big hit to academia because they're going to have to compete with that because that's going to be free online college. There's nothing you can't learn on your own if you're committed to it. Okay? So, so this is just another one of the manifestations of the all-out war that's being waged by the Q operation against commie academia.
And how many times, Mike, have we talked about the design of this operation is to use left to eat the left? Right? Like, could you imagine if a bunch of right wingers,
right,
if a bunch of truthers went out there and started marching on the campuses and saying, "Hey, by the way, Israel is the bad guy"? Could you imagine how that would look? Right? Yeah. No, make the left do it.
The nice thing about it is part of that left-wing anti-Zionist infrastructure was already in place because there's an internal rivalry among the international mafia class. The globalist Marxists and the hardcore Zionists don't always get along because the globalists kind of see Israel as a pain in the ass that destabilizes the region and complicates our efforts to get Arab countries on board with the New World Order. So that's always existed. For example, Soros and Netanyahu hate each other, or I should use the past tense, hated each other, right? So that always existed. So now you can just plug in and you've got that network because, the foot soldiers on the lower levels don't understand who's controlling it. So now what used to be Soros-led or Soros-funded maneuvers against Israel it's just been taken over by the Q operation. Okay, so you probably got a lot of these lefties in the street. They don't know who they're working for now, but that has worked now because now you got both elements of this international criminal element fighting each other, a divide and conquer. But these are Q-run operations, these anti-Israel protests. So
I agree with you.
I don't know if you've ever seen
the same thing.
What's that?
No, all boiling down to the same thing that I said before, playing their game against them.
Yeah, yep. Total game.
It's all about.
Mario Puzo, the author of The Godfather, used to say, if you want to understand the world works, read The Godfather or watch The Godfather. And it's so true, all of these kind of manipulations and maneuvers. But there's a scene in The Godfather. The Godfather 1 is about two mafia families at war. The Corleones and the Tattaglias, just whacking each other back and forth. And then finally, there's a sit down. The big commission has a meeting to have the heads of the five families sit down, work out their differences. And Don Corleone realizes at the meeting that he really wasn't fighting the Tattaglias. It was Don Barzini, who's pretending to be an honest broker. He was the one organizing. And he was the one using the Tattaglias to fight the Corleones. So this is very similar because it's like Trump is playing the role of Barzini, okay? And you've got these two warring factions going against each other. So he continues to say, I support Israel, I love Bibi Netanyahu, when in reality, he's using other fronts to wage the war against that entity. So that's how it works. It's just perfect. And he has to maneuver that way because of Israel's historic popularity in this country, particularly amongst some of these evangelical types who have this weird interpretation of the Bible in which they essentially worship Israel, and that's a lot of votes in the Republican Party. And you can't explain to these people the truth, so you got to kind of maneuver. So it's very, very delicate maneuvering whenever this subject of Israel comes up. Okay, so that's why you have this kind of manipulation.
And it's juxtaposed against a now departed, albeit fake, Democratic administration.
Yeah,
that did nothing about this. That did nothing about it. That so you're also have a group of people in the Jewish, especially here in places like New York, where it's if you're Jewish, you automatically vote Democrat. It's been that way forever. So now they're watching their own people being attacked, and this is remember, this didn't just start. This started over a year ago. So you've had all this stuff breaking out, all this anti-Semitism on the campuses, and Biden did absolutely nothing about it. And now here is Trump, the arch enemy of the Democrats, stepping in saying, "I'll fix the problem." And I think you're going to see a lot more of this. I think you may see this escalate quite a bit. And just give him more reason. But that's exactly what. So it's funny, Mike, because you mentioned the American Academy. I think it's worthwhile taking 2 minutes to rewatch this video, because this is almost 2 years old at this point. But sometimes it's fun to go through these shows and analyze the problems and show people that the solution's already here. The solution is, in my humble opinion, the solution is already here. It's been planned and likely executed behind the scenes, and we just don't know about it yet. So let's go back. I believe this was about 18 months ago, might have even been longer, and listen to Donald Trump's solution for higher education in the United States, which is going to be free for everybody. And this is going to be the nail in the coffin for the woke universities when we get to the end of this whole thing.
In recent weeks, have been horrified to see students and faculty at Harvard and other once respected universities expressing support for the savages and jihadists who attacked Israel. We spend more money on higher education than any other country, and yet they're turning our students into communists and terrorists and sympathizers of many, many different dimensions. We can't let this happen. It's time to offer something dramatically different. Under the plan I'm announcing today, we will take the billions and billions of dollars that we will collect by taxing, fining, and suing excessively large private university endowments, and we will then use that money to endow a new institution called the American Academy. Its mission will be to make a truly world-class education available to every American, free of charge, and do it without adding a single dime to the federal debt. This institution will gather an entire universe of the highest quality educational content covering the full spectrum of human knowledge and skills, and make that material available to every American citizen online for free. Whether you want lectures or ancient histories or an introduction to financial accounting or training in a skilled trade, the goal will be to deliver it and get it done properly, using study groups, mentors, industry partnerships, and the latest breakthrough in computing. This will be a truly top-tier education option for the people. It will be strictly non-political, and there will be no wokeness or jihadism allowed. None of that's going to be allowed. Most importantly, the American Academy will compete directly with the existing and very costly four-year university system by granting students degree credentials that the U.S. government and all federal contractors will henceforth recognize. The Academy will award the full and complete equivalent of a bachelor's degree. In addition, to help the 40 million Americans who have some college education but no degree, the American Academy will grant credit for past coursework at legacy institutions and give you the chance to complete your education at the American Academy for free and much more quickly than is now possible or available. This will be a revolution in higher education and will provide life-changing opportunities for tens of millions of our citizens. Enjoy it, learn from it, and thank you.
Translation: free college for all.
Yeah.
Free college for all, and the credits will transfer. But this is where, the first time I played this, people really have to dig down and think about fifth generation warfare and what we're looking at right now. Like Mike said, he's going after the endowments, right? What you're watching right now that Mike just presented is the public presentation of how they are taking back the money. In my humble opinion, the real way that they took back the money was years ago through those executive orders and crimes against humanity and election rigging. For example, Johns Hopkins rigged a lot of the statistics. Johns Hopkins rigged the COVID statistics. UNC Chapel Hill likely helped create COVID-19. My alma mater, Boston University, they reported a few years ago, created a strain of COVID-19. Harvard was involved. They've already taken all the endowments, because if you actually listen to what he's saying there, that we're going to do it through lawsuits and everything else, stop and think about how we're perceiving the world right now. Right now, everything Trump is trying to do, there's supposedly a judge getting in the way. If Donald Trump were to actually go and try to sue and take endowments in the current system, it would be him, his son, and probably his son's son in office before we ever got through all the lawsuits to get to any of that stuff. It would be decades of lawsuits and motions and stays and all that other stuff to actually get to a point where you could even sue and get one endowment, let alone dozens of them. So how is he so confident that he can take that money? Because he already has.
Yeah.
He already has. There's no other way. You're not doing that through the court. So I think that, Mike, that's a brilliant piece, because I think you're exactly right. These contrived protests and the clawing back of the money is just the beginning in many of giving people the public justification for what I certainly believe they've already done.
Yeah.
In the background.
Yeah.
These are the things that we've waited all of this time for, that are now being revealed. And like we've discussed before, the only way that they could be rolled out so quickly is because they've already happened.
Yeah.